All right. Good afternoon, evening for us over here on the East Coast. So Ebony and I are here tonight to cover off on one of the questions that we got asked last week. So we popped a bit of a post in our group and asked everybody to kind of let us know what it is they are what sort of problems they're having with their birds at the moment, what sort of topics they're interested in hearing more about. And one of the topics that was kind of suggested was a work-life balance. So, to explain that a little bit more, it was kind of, how to make sure that we're providing our birds what they need socially, while also having to go and work like most of us have to do. So it's a pretty cool topic, and I think it's kind of relevant, even more so having spent a lot of time at home last year for many people. They kind of, were working from home, and so their bird got used to them being at home, and it may have been harder to work from home then as well, because you've got a bird and you feel like, I know I do, I work from home all of the time. So it's also hard to find that balance of letting the birds out, but also getting your work done as well. So yeah, so what we'll do is this is a Q&A as well. So if you've got questions specific to your own parrots, then you can pop those down in the comment section for us, and we will try to answer those as we go. We've got a few things that we'll cover off on that we think will be helpful for those of you who are trying to get that balance right. Pop your comments down, questions down. We'll answer your specific questions for your birds as well. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll kick off. So, Ebony, you don't work from home, so you've probably got a better. I've worked from home pretty much the entire time I've had my own birds. So, I think, it's not always better, I can tell you. There are days where I'm like, it would be nice to just have a set day and go out of the house, because then I don't have to feel guilty that, maybe I should let the birds out or so Ebony, what do you find is probably like your number one tip for how you manage your life with your birds successfully around like a pretty busy work schedule as well, because you don't just work for parrot life, but you're also you work in other places as well, so you're a pretty busy person.
Yeah, being organised and being prepared, so having all that enrichment ready to go, so I don't have to try and put it together as I'm running out the front door.
Yes.
Especially my guys, they're at the point with their enrichment that they're pretty clever, so I have to make it quite hard to keep them busy for an extended period of time, and that takes time to build it. So I like to do it while I'm watching TV, so I don't have to think about it too much. And I like to watch TV a lot anyway, so it makes it a lot easier to fit it into my day. And I tend to put the new stuff in the evening before they go to bed, because they're not really going to play with it. And it means I don't have to wake them up in the morning before I leave for work if I'm going earlier than everyone else that lives in my house. So that's one little thing I've found that's made a big difference with them in the morning.
Yep, I like that, and it's something that I talk to, and it's something that I do as well. Is if I'm sitting in front of the TV watching a TV show, there's literally no reason that I can't just be sitting there and making some enrichment toys up for my birds, and it just takes so much pressure off the next day, because you don't then have to try and come up with something interesting for them to do. You've already planned it, prepped it, it's ready. You just have to either do what you do and put it in the evening, or you put it in just before you head out for the day, whatever it happens to be. But yeah, and realistically, depending on the amount of birds that you have and things like that, you can prep, a few days worth of foraging toys in a night, which also means that you don't have to do it every night of the week, but rather maybe you're doing it once a week or twice a week as well. So it kind of cuts down on workload. I find I'm way more creative with my foraging toys when I'm not under pressure, because I'm like, I just need to get this done so I can get out of the house. So yeah.
Yeah. And trying to
That's
go
a really
quietly.
good
I'm like, here you go, goodbye. Bye.
So true. Yeah. And it's something that I recommend to all of my clients as well, because I think all of us take that, even if it's just an hour in the evenings to watch like a favorite TV show, or most of us. Okay, admittedly, occasionally I have a client that doesn't have a TV or doesn't watch TV, but most of us take that little bit of time for ourselves in the evening, sit down and chill out for a bit, and that's a great time to do that and just get it out of the way. So I like that.
Yeah.
I like is it Cassie that refers to it as mum on the run?
Yeah, I am very guilty of that too with the foraging tray. I'm like, here you go, goodbye, love you. I'll throw it in and I'll shake it a little bit and then add some extra stuff on top to make it hard, and then I'm gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a really good tip, and I think that's like, if everyone just took one thing away from this live, it's like just pre-prep foraging toys in the evening when you're watching TV. That's like number one tip. I promise you, it's so much nicer to get up in the morning and be like, oh, I don't have to make things.
Yeah. And especially if there's more than one person in the house that can handle the birds. So my ones are pretty much the only one that handles them. But because everything's pre-prepared and there's extra stuff, not just what they need for that day, if they're starting to be noisy or they just are being annoying, they can just put another tray in there for them. Just shut them up for a bit longer until I get home.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true as well. Yeah, giving other people those opportunities to be able to give them something to do if they're home while you're not there as well. And I think, that enrichment, like foraging and enrichment activities, are kind of one of your best friends when you do work outside, well, in your home or outside of your home, to be honest. But when you can't be there and you are trying to ensure that they're getting that good balance of like active time versus, inactive time during their day, though that foraging and varied foraging is like a huge part of that. Like my birds don't get any of their pellets as Linda said hi, Ebony. Hi, Linda. So my birds don't get any of their pellets from food bowls generally. Pretty much all of my pellets I put into different foraging toys. And I choose pellets primarily because they're just the cleanest to utilize. So instead of, I can use paper or cardboard and it's not going to get all sticky or go gross. And in summer, it's not going to get smelly and off because it's got fruit or veggies in it. So pellets are kind of easy to use like that. They're easy to wrap up in paper and pop in all sorts of different bits and pieces. So, but that's kind of my philosophy, is it's like as much of their diet as possible every day goes into some kind of foraging activity. And I think that's a really important part to having a good work-life balance for your birds, is making sure they have activities to do when we're not around, as well as when we're around. And we'll circle back to that later. But, we've got to keep in mind that in the wild, they'd be active for 6 or so hours every day foraging for food. So we're probably never going to be able to get them foraging for food for 6 hours a day, not unless you have a lot of spare time on your hands. But they certainly, we can give them more to do. So anything else to add there?
No, that was pretty much it. Just trying to keep them as busy as you can.
Yes. So Tamara has asked, how do you set up good habits for your parrot? Hey, Tamara, can you, that's a very, very open question. Tamara, is there a particular good habit that you're talking about? Could you elaborate a little bit more on that question for us, and we'll circle back to it in a little while. So yeah, if you could, just give us a bit of a bit more information on what you're asking there, and we can try and dive into it a bit. Linda has asked enrichment ideas for aviary birds as a change from browse and chew sticks. So love browse. Always makes me super happy to see birds that interact with browse as well. So it's not just being put in their aviary or their cage for the sake of it, but that you can see them actually sitting there and chewing it. And it just makes me all warm and fuzzy inside, because it's such a natural behaviour for them to be engaging in. But certainly it's nice. It's nice to be able to give them other things to do. I guess probably one of my favourite things is a baffle cage. So like, as far as I'm concerned, you can't go wrong with a baffle cage. And if you're going to spend money on any toy, it would certainly be a baffle cage. And partially because they're just so versatile. You can have your fruits and veggies in there, and but you could also have pellets wrapped in paper and cardboard in there, or you can have just gum nuts and Banksia pods shoved into it. They're really versatile. You can change them, and almost every day it can be something new for the better part of a week before you are going back over it again. So baffle cages are really good. Foraging trays are another one that I use a lot, and depending on the size of your aviary, in my biggest aviary I've got a shell pool, like the ones that you buy for your kids or your dogs, and that's for my macaw. So not a shell pool is probably not going to be suitable for really small birds. Could be, but and I put pebbles, leaves, bark, you name it, anything that's safe for birds, bits of toys that have been broken up and dropped on the floor, into that. And then I get, and sometimes you don't even need to put any food in there. It's just you've put interesting items and objects for them to investigate and explore, but you can also sprinkle their pellets in there. Again, I wouldn't recommend fruit or veggies for foraging trays, because otherwise you have to clean the whole tray out at the end of the day, which is not fun. But you can sprinkle pellets in there, or something else that your bird finds interesting. Any other ideas there, Ebony?
Not really. It was just going to be depending on what your substrate is for the bottom of the aviary. If you're not overfeeding them, then potentially you could actually skip the foraging tray completely and just mum on the run it on the side of the aviary when you're leaving in the morning. Just having
I've done that as well. Sometimes when I'm like lazy and I'm like, I'll just be like, pellets on the floor.
Yes. So that would be if you're not overfeeding, because you don't want to attract rats and mice, of course. So it would just be small portions.
Yes, correct. Yeah. You don't want your bird to ignore it and then you have to go and pick it all up again later. That's no fun. I guess also, thinking in terms of enrichment, and if you haven't, we have a video on enrichment from last year in our vlog section, which kind of covers off on what enrichment is, because we often kind of pigeonhole enrichment into foraging, but realistically enrichment is this whole umbrella of lots of different things, and foraging is just one part of it. So in an aviary, and we love aviaries, and really, one of the things that I wrote down for tonight was, for work-life balance, is if you can have it, if you've got the space and you're allowed to do it, get yourself an aviary. Even if your bird's not going to be out there every single day, it switches things up. And the reason for that is because just a well set up aviary meets a lot of enrichment targets, all of the different types of enrichment, just through being outdoors, natural, sunlight, wind, rain, other birds nearby, et cetera, et cetera. So, but, I also think in terms of things like having different kinds of perching. So, I don't want to just have timber, I might also go with, or I don't want to have everything well attached, so I don't want everything to be a stable perch, you know, so I'll have swings, and I'll have swings of different sizes, so they move a different amount depending on what, you know, the size of my bird and how fast they land, so they've got that movement under their feet. I use sisal rope perches because, again, that's just a different kind of feel for them. So perching's a big part of it, having things like bird baths and things like that as well, so the bird can get in and have a bath if they want to do that. Those, you know, those all kind of come under that as well. So you're thinking in terms of substrate, thinking in terms of perching, access to different weather patterns, access to opportunities to bathe. Basically, the more normal, natural bird behaviour you can get them engaging in, the better off you're going to be. And I think it's going to also come down to the species you've got as well, because you can certainly set up some foraging and enrichment that are kind of species specific too. Anne said that she uses an old steel tray from the bottom of her cage, and she put small river rocks in it, then hid tiny nut pieces and pellets in that, made it nice and challenging to find those little treats. That was in an aviary situation. Yeah, that's a good idea, like the steel trays that you can get from the bottom of your old cages, and keep those on board, and they make, yeah, those would make good foraging trays as well. So that's good. I like that. For smaller birds, I use like kitty litter trays that you just get from like Kmart or Coles, because they're super cheap and just easy to clean. They're plastic, not so great for bigger birds, but good for smaller birds. Or cardboard boxes. I've used cardboard boxes, shoe boxes, all of that sort of stuff. I think for an aviary bird as well is, yeah, go.
I was just going to say, for smaller birds, we had a lovebird that had a little ceramic baking dish for his foraging tray, because it was nice and easy to clean, and they just got a second hand from Salvo, so they just got a couple, so they're easy to wash and have set up ready to go.
That's it. Yeah, so many different ideas. I think it also comes down to what you're comfortable with. So recently I have been, and again, it's like with enrichment and in foraging, it's super important that when you're giving new things, that you monitor initially. So recently I've been like keeping, you know, the occasional soft drink bottle, and then I'll just put pellets in that when it's washed and dried out, and the macaws really like throwing those around. So yeah, and it's kind of like a Kong for birds, but harder. So because they've got to get it just right for those pellets to come out that top hole. So but again, it's not necessarily going to be suitable for every bird, and you do need to sort of monitor that first bird, that first interaction, to make sure they're not going to do anything that's potentially harmful for them with it. I like cardboard boxes, like any cardboard box that comes into my house. Any kind of cardboard that comes into my house is recycled as some kind of bird enrichment toy. So whether they're just threaded onto kebabs with bits of timber and other, you know, toy parts and whatever I can find. But I also will just use paper and wrap pellets in paper and shove those into a box, and then close the box and hang it from the roof, or I'll throw it on the floor. So I change up how I'm offering these items. So it might be the same item sometimes, but how I give that to my bird changes as well. So, you know, any cardboard box, I think, is a great enrichment toy for most birds. Just keeping in mind that if you give your bird a big cardboard box and they can get inside of it and they are feeling a bit breedy, then they might decide that that cardboard box is a great nest. So you do need to be cautious of whether your bird is feeling nesty. And then if they are, just keep it to smaller cardboard boxes. Awesome. Cool. Nothing else to add there, Ed?
No, that was it.
Sweet. So I'm just going to scroll back, have a look at some of this green cheek conure. So this is from Tamara. She had a green cheek conure first day at home today. So I mean, it, like, you know, on the topic of work-life balance for your birds, I guess what we were just talking about is kind of the big one. It's from the get-go, get some foraging and enrichment going into your bird's cage. Make sure that you going out of the house is, you know, something that's positive for the bird. They get fun, interactive things to do when you're leaving the house. So this way they don't become stressed or anxious about you needing to leave. They're not bored. They're not likely to then scream. So I think that's a really big part of it, is getting that foraging and enrichment sort of going as soon as possible. Don't wait. There's literally, there's no such thing as too soon for foraging and enrichment. Like as soon as baby birds leave the nest and are able to fly, they would be, you know, gradually starting to follow their parents around and learn about foraging. So by the time they've come home to us, hopefully they're fully weaned and fledged. And so we're at that stage where we can start to teach them about foraging, and you can start really simple with things like foraging trays, where you can, you know, set it up on a table and get your bird, like pop them down on a tray and sit there with them and just drop treats into it so they can see you dropping the food into the tray. And all they have to do is hop in, grab that bit of food, you drop another one. Little simple things like that, because birds don't come pre-programmed with foraging. They don't know until they're taught. Normally they're taught by their parents, so we need to teach them. There is a little foraging video as well. If you go to the enrichment section of the guides in our group, you should be able to find a video on how to introduce foraging to your birds. So that would be one. The other one, and great interlude here, is independent play. I would strongly recommend from as early as possible you start teaching that little conure to play independently. And so we did a post about this on our page a couple of days ago with a little infographic on some of the techniques that we recommend for independent play, for encouraging independent play in parrots. I'm going to hand it over to Ebony for a second. I'm going to see if I can pull that infographic up for us so that I can show it on the screen. So I'll let Ebony talk a bit about independent play. Go for it.
So ideally you want your independent play to be happening whilst you are home and also when you're not home. So it's not dependent on whether you are actually there or not. They know what to do with these items. So generally you start off nice and easy and you gradually make it harder and harder for them as they get smarter and smarter, to keep it nice and interesting for them, and always rotating what you're offering as well, to keep it nice and fresh and fun, and giving them a place when they do come out and hang out with you is a good way to help with that as well. Whether it's a play stand or just a perch, you can put their foraging or interactive toys on there and they can hang out and do that instead of bugging you as you're trying to do your normal adult things. And giving them that independence means that they're not going to be stuck to you like a Velcro bird, for the most part.
Yeah, so exactly. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make with baby birds is having them, is they're so cute and cuddly, especially certain species, and conures would certainly fall under that normally. We get into the habit of having them on us, cuddling with us, and that's how they spend most of their time as babies when they're not in their cages, on our bodies, following us around, getting snuggles. And then as they grow up, we don't love it so much. And we end up with a whole host of behaviour problems that are associated with this like codependent relationship that they develop, and this lack of ability to be independent, play independently, do their own thing. And part of that is going to be separation anxiety, so not being comfortable with you leaving them, screaming when you leave the room, screaming when you leave the house. So yeah, absolutely, I would strongly encourage independent play from the get-go. So here's that infographic, and it is here in the group as well as on our Facebook page. So we encourage you to make sure that your parrot has play stands, so provide them with various play spaces that are separate to their cage, so not just a play top on top of their cage, but also, you know, 1 or 2 trees ideally around, or, you know, depends on how much space and that you've got, but the more space you've had, you know, the more stands you can have. You can have stands in each room of the house if you want to. Foraging, so provide lots of foraging activities on their designated play areas, keeping aside favoured food items for this purpose. Toy rotation, so keep those toys interesting. Having the same toys in your play stand all of the time is going to get really boring. If your bird isn't interacting with it, it's not fun. And then also actively reinforcing that time that they spend on their play stand. So we tend to ignore our birds when they are being good and hanging out on their play stand. But what we actually want to do is go over and reinforce them for being on their play stand, playing with their toys, foraging, preening, just being on their own. Go over, give them attention, give them some treats, make it so that that's the behaviour that gets your attention. And this is true for all birds. This is, in response to Tamara's question at the moment, but this was also one of the notes that I wrote down for having birds for that, kind of successfully having a good work-life balance for your parrots is that having them able to play independently is a huge part of that, because it means that, at those times of the day where maybe you're busy doing other things like making dinner or getting the kids in bed, you don't necessarily have to put your bird away because they're, flying around, following you around the house. They're in danger of landing on, hot stoves. They can be off doing their own thing, which means that they do get more time out of their cage, but you can kind of don't have to have the bird on top of you while that's happening. So it does make it more realistic for us to have our bird out for periods of time. So Tamara, hopefully that gives you somewhere to start with that one. Let's see, what are some do's and don'ts? That's really, I'm going to ask you to clarify that one for me if you're still around. And I can't see your name on my screen. Oh, not that one. But I just got a question that said, what are some do's and don'ts? If you could be a bit more specific about do's and don'ts, that would be excellent. Although I can, I'll come back around to that one as well, because I guess there are some don'ts for helping to avoid problem behaviours. Hey, Kimberly, thanks. Yes, not long now until PTA 301 here in Brisbane. Cool. So Megan has said, how can you get your bird to trust another family person to put him away into bed at night? Last night she worked an afternoon shift, didn't get home till 10 p.m. Her daughter wasn't able to put him to bed because, yeah, okay. This is, I guess, less of a work-life balance issue and probably just a bit more of a training issue. And it's hard to, I guess, touch base on this in a Q&A like this, but one of the things that I would strongly recommend is getting your daughter or other people that live with your bird to spend time interacting and training them inside the house, or even going out in the aviary and spending time interacting with them. We can't necessarily expect our birds to be trusting of someone that they don't get a lot of interactions with, and so one of the first steps to kind of overcoming that issue would be for other people to be engaging the bird in training games. So, teaching the bird to do some target training, to do some step up, but do it, when the bird is comfortable and when no one's in a rush. So not necessarily when we're trying to get the bird back in the house, because that puts a lot of pressure on everyone. Ebony, anything to add to that one?
I find for my guys at home that if I know that I'm going to be home later, I will generally have it a little bit darker for them. So then when they go to bed, it's time to go to bed. So in this example, if you're able to bring the macaw back inside before you leave for work and giving them lots of things to do in the meantime would be a good workaround until the bird is confident to work for other people, because the birds pick up on all that energy, whether you're trying to be calm or not. And if the other person is not confident, of course, it's pretty big, they can be pretty scary. You want to make sure that your bird is going to get in and out safely as well and not getting spooked. And any work that you do with your bird and the other family members can come undone if you have a few negative interactions. So we just want to try and keep it nice and positive and just managing it as best you can until they are happy to work for someone else.
Absolutely, I agree. Awesome, cool. I'm back. So Kaz has a question. She said she works full time until about 6 p.m. So when she gets home, it's Patrick's time. Patrick is her Alexandrine. He'll sit on her shoulder very happily until she needs to do something specific, which takes her attention away from him. He gets angry and bites at her shoulder, pins and growls. Her big mistake is she's gotten into the habit of holding her finger up to stop him, which drives him crazy. He hates fingers, and I'm trying to desensitize him. How do I reverse the damage? This is I think actually this kind of circles back to independent play, to be honest. So I would be, I totally understand what you're saying, that you you're working a long day, you get home pretty late, you want to make sure that you're spending time with Patrick. So I, two-pronged answer here. And again, I love this. People are asking questions and I'm like, oh, look, here's the things that I wrote down to talk about. Thanks. Perfect questions. So one of the other things that I wrote down was that our time with our parrots, we want to focus on quality, not just quantity. So don't focus on having him out for 2 hours, because realistically in that 2 hours, as you're experiencing, because you're going for quantity, you're ending up with times where you can't be fully interacting with him because you have other things that you need to do, or your attention is kind of diverted elsewhere. So focusing on quality interactions with him, so where you are actively interacting and engaging with him, as one part of it. And then the other part is independent play. So when you can't be actively interacting with him, then that's where we start thinking in terms of having him hang out on a play stand, do some foraging while he's there, while he waits for you to finish what you're doing and come back to doing some active stuff with him. On that, I'm just going to add this awesome little infographic. I shared this on our stories yesterday. This is one. So there was one going around for dogs, and then Robin at Canada Bird School adjusted that and made it up for birds. And so this is like 5 minutes with your bird. You can choose one of these. So these are kind of cool ways that you can interact with your bird, and it's active interaction. So so you've got like a play one. So, blow kisses, play peekaboo, species specific games. So like, cockatoos like to throw things, wreck things, crash through things. Any destruction is good for a cockatoo. Kayaks like to do the surfing thing, so they grab your clothes and surf on it, or they like to hop and chase things around. So, have a think about what sort of games Patrick might like. Free play, interacting with bells and noisemakers. So you've got like that. So, you take 5 minutes to do like a really active play session. You can do, then you can have another 5 minutes somewhere where you do a slow down, a chill session. You do head scratches with consent if your bird likes it. Some Alexandrines don't, most in fact. Chill out together, do snuggles, watch them preening, look out the window together, you walk around the house and look at what's going on outside of the windows. You can sit and, share a cup of tea, making sure that it's obviously bird safe tea, but you can sit and share a cup of tea, so kind of like slow down, doing mindful things. Then there's obviously training. So you can do active training sessions. You can do enrichment feeding, and enrichment feeding can be both interactive and independent. So there are times where you can sit down and like do an activity with your bird that is foraging or enrichment, or you can set them up with something on a play stand. You do a busy beak setup, so that's where you're just basically getting them to engage with various objects, toys, things that they can rip, shred, tear, break again. So there's that one there. And prize giving, so just reinforcing your bird for things that they're actively engaging in that you like them doing. So this is a really cool list. It's obviously not exhaustive by any means. It's more a bit of a guideline, but this is the sort of stuff that I would be thinking in terms of, so when we've got Patrick out of his cage after we get home, you know, what actual like active interactions can we have with him? And then when we're not actively interacting with him, let's get him doing something else. Let's get him on a play stand foraging. So feel free to let me know if that kind of answers your question, Kaz. And Ebony, do you have anything to add to that?
Ultimately, it comes down to your bird and what they prefer. I've got one that she'll do a little bit of training and then she just wants to hang out for 10 minutes and then she's done. She's like, yep, I'm just going to put myself to bed and have a toy. And I'm like, okay, you can go do that. But my other one will sit out for literally an hour or two and he'll happily just hang out on his perch. So it just depends on your individual parrot and what they like, and just having realistic expectations for them. Yeah,
very true. Cool. So Kaz, I don't know if you're still around, but if you are, just let us know if that kind of helped, if that answered your question there. Kimberly has said, I'll bring it up here. It's a bit of a long one. This is a little bit off topic for what we're covering tonight. She went to the vets. So one bird is slightly underweight with a little less muscle mass. Some levels in his bloods are a little low and they think it's due to regurgitation or vomiting. He's obsessed with my other half and the vets recommend I try giving him treats to get him used to me and not regurgitating on my other half like he does. But when the other half is around, he doesn't want to bar of me and scream sometimes when he isn't around. How can I change that? This is sounds like your bird has pair bonded to your partner, which does occur sometimes. I would be like, this is like the sort of thing that I would be looking in terms of talking about reducing hormones as a start. So, you know, why does your bird feel like it needs to look for a partner? Why is it pair bonding at the moment? So, you know, have a look at your diet and environment setup and make sure that we're not providing opportunities for the bird to engage in cavity seeking or nesting behaviour. Make sure that the bird's getting plenty of good quality sleep. Have a look at the diet. Is there anything in the diet that's a little bit too high in fats or sugars that might be contributing, amongst other things as well. So, and not just, and I guess overabundance of food is another potential issue. We do have some videos and Q&As on hormones and things like that. So I definitely recommend you have a look at those because they should help. I think, you know, giving your bird treats is maybe, it doesn't sound like the bird doesn't like you so much as that bird is just finds your partner more reinforcing at the moment because he's decided that your partner is a potential mate. So, and when they kick into that drive of, you know, there's a potential mate around, that it can be a really valuable reinforcer for them to get access to that person. So it can be really difficult to overcome that without first overcoming why the bird is in a breeding flush in the first place. And so I would be looking at, you know, what we can do to reduce a breeding flush as a first and foremost. And realistically, if, you know, the bird is engaging in behaviour that is harmful for itself, so the bird is regurgitating so often and so much that nutritionally the bird is lacking, then that might be a case of looking at, that's, you know, the sort of situation where we go, well, maybe that's a bird that does require maybe a hormone implant to assist, because there's health aspects there that aren't, you know, that really need to be addressed in order for the bird to be healthy and happy. So and I know it can be tough. Sometimes we can manage the birds really, really well, and we can have their diet down pat, and we can have their sleep schedule nice, and we can be not touching them anywhere but on the head, and we can be, you know, not kind of triggering those breeding responses, but we've still got that bird that is just, you know, a lot more driven than another bird the same species in the same setup. So that's very individual as well. So I would be thinking in terms of if, oh, we've lost Ebony. Bye, Ebony. So I would be thinking in terms of if I, looking at those breeding triggers first and foremost, and then if those seem to be all on par, then maybe talking to your vet about the potential for a hormone implant to see if that helps as well. Cool. So we've got another question here. So Gina has a ringneck parrot named Jasper who had a very bad start in life. For the first 8 years, he was in a dog carry cage. He was only ever fed on very bad quality seed. Moving forward, they rescued him and have now had him for 8 years. He has some very significant delays. He'll never play with toys, can't talk, sometimes doesn't recognize food, but when he is given food, he will like to be hand-fed, but at times just bang his beak on it. We've spent many hours with him. Now we've had him for 8 years, so he's approximately 16. Wow. 16. That's awesome. Give or take a year or two. He's gotten into a bad habit of screaming all day in and day out. We have him out as soon as we get home. We've tried to train him many times, but no joy in this. He is friendly, will sit on our hands. He has become very flighty, and I feel extremely stressed. He's twitching his wings, can't settle, flighty, paces back and forth, head bangs things. Okay. Yeah, so that sounds like there's a lot going on. Gina, my first question would be, and we'll circle back to you once you've got a chance to answer this, but has he had a recent vet check at all? So when did you said you feel he's extremely stressed, and you said he became very flighty. So I'm wondering when exactly that happened. When did that change? When did his behavior change and he became flighty? And has he had a vet check in the last, in that kind of period of time to rule out any potential health or physical issues? Because when we see a behavior change like that, especially when you're talking about things like suddenly becoming fearful or seemingly stressed or worried, then that can be an indicator of pain or illness of some kind. So that's something that I would be thinking about. So you got him, his last check was 12 months ago. Okay. And was that before or after the flighty behavior started happening? It's been worse. Yeah. Yeah. I would recommend another vet check just to rule it out. Being a slightly older bird, although 16 isn't super, super, super old for a ringneck, for realistically, they should be able to live a fair bit longer than that. I think that there's a potential that maybe there's some old bird things going on there as well. Maybe having trouble with eyesight, or maybe some arthritis, or potentially being that he was fed an all-seed diet for a really long time. Maybe there are now health issues popping up from that nutrition deficiency and poor diet as well. And so it's worthwhile just having a really thorough vet check as well. So, I'd be looking at doing things like, like a full blood panel and things like that as well, just to rule out, make sure that there's nothing wrong with his liver or anything like that. Rule out, like I said, any eyesight issues or any, potential arthritis or anything that might be popping up to help with that. The screaming that you mentioned, sorry, Facebook does weird things. It's very annoying. You mentioned screaming. Oh, cool. Okay. Lovely. Yeah, so he's had a pretty thorough check. Okay, that's good. Yeah. So I think there's, even with a good thorough vet check, sometimes things are going to degenerate over time as well. If they've got an issue with eyesight or they've got other health issues, those things are going to continue to get worse over time, and that may continue to contribute to problem behaviours as well. So, if your eyesight is poor and you're a prey animal, then you're going to get, more nervous, more flighty. So the screaming, are you saying the screaming started to happen at the same time as well? Or I would recommend you start with the webinar that we've got. We've got a screaming webinar that we did last year, resolving excessive screaming. It's available on demand from our shop. I would start with that because that's a good kind of intro to how, the behaviour modification for screaming. And then if you need more help from there, then, I would probably especially if it's been going on for a really long time, screaming can be particularly difficult to get on top of, and it really needs a very customized training plan for the situation and the bird. It's hard to just give out tips, unfortunately, because we really need to know a little bit more about what's going on in the environment and the situation in order to successfully kind of provide appropriate instructions for that. So, but definitely check out the Resolving Excessive Screaming webinar, because there is a lot of really good stuff in there, and it's really not very expensive at all. So cool. Kaz came back, so she had Patrick the Alexandrian. She does do most of those things with him, but there's some great ideas in there. What do I now do specifically training-wise to stop him with the finger issue? When I hold my finger up, it stops him biting my shoulder, but encourages him to keep doing it because he's getting a reaction. Yeah, so look, I would be not doing that, and I would be being really super proactive. And so what I mean by that is if for some reason, Patrick's riding around on your shoulder, you guys are doing things together, la, 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 but you're going to do something that is a potential trigger for that biting behavior, then I would cue him off you. So get him to jump down onto a play stand, give him something to do there. So, sprinkle some food in a foraging tray or give him a foraging toy of some kind, and then do the thing you've got to do. So I wouldn't even be putting myself in the situation of him starting the biting behavior. I would be having him hop off my shoulder before we get to that point in the first place. That way you don't have to bring your finger up. You don't have to put up with him biting your shoulder. You don't have to bring your finger up and potentially cause some, all of your work on desensitizing to fingers go backwards. And then once you're able to get out of the habit of utilizing that as an aversive, then you should be able to pick back up the training that you were doing with desensitizing him to your finger. But while you're using it as an aversive, that's going to obviously just set your training back. Ebony, anything to add to those ones?
I would maybe just look at doing target training. So just getting a target stick and teaching him to follow that. So instead of following your finger or your hands, you can ask him to get off you onto those items and build up those items as their own cue or place. So then that way you don't have to put your hand up to him to get him off you, like Leah was saying. But it's really your preference. If you really aren't fussed with him being on your shoulder at all, he doesn't have to be up there. He can be down here instead. Sorry, can't say down here instead, or just on another spot where he's allowed to be. I personally don't like having birds up on my shoulder, so mine don't sit here at all. I just reinforce them being anywhere else but here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the other one, is that, if I consider, I don't mind my birds getting up on my shoulder occasionally, but I don't really encourage them to spend long periods of time there, because there is just more chance that you're going to get through odds. The longer your bird's on your shoulder, the more chance there is that you're going to get bitten on the face or on the shoulder or on the neck, just because the longer they're there. But not just that, also it does discourage that independent play and doing their own thing. But yeah, I also consider this spot an earned spot. You need to be trustworthy to spend time here, and if you're not trustworthy, then you don't get to be here. And so any birds that haven't earned that have to stay down on my arm or on my hands. But I know that that's not always convenient, because then you're down a hand when you're trying to do things. So but again, I would be encouraging you not to be doing those activities that tend to cause the biting in the first place with him on your shoulder for the time being. So Kimberly has said, just updating on the sun conure that was regurgitating a lot. he sleeps with another bird in his cage, but he also tries feeding some toys as well, so I'm assuming it's something I need to remove. This is where I get that this is, again, this is a sort of behaviour that gets really difficult because it's, kind of unfair for the other bird to not have access to toys. Also, you don't want them to necessarily not have access to toys. So I would be looking at why the bird's regurgitating rather than removing all of the toys and things like that. I mean, it depends on what type of toys we're talking about in feeding. If it's a shiny bell or a mirror, then yeah, take those out, leave other toys in. If it's all toys, then we need to really look at, quality of life in terms of like, we can't just have a bird sitting in a cage with no toys because he regurgitates. We need to work out why the bird's regurgitating and get on top of that rather than just kind of slap it, like trying to put a Band-Aid on it. So, and I would be wanting to investigate. I guess it sounds like it's regurgitation. He's doing it specifically for toys. He's doing it for a particular person. It certainly sounds like regurgitation and not vomiting or anything like that. But I would definitely be really looking at those triggers for hormone flushes, and if those aren't, if you've got all of those under control, then I would certainly be talking to my vet again about a potential hormone implant, because excessive regurgitation is obviously not healthy, especially if you're already, identifying that the bird is underweight and has, muscle loss and things like that. Then, if you've got a bird that's already underweight, they can't necessarily stand to lose more weight. So, I would definitely be trying to, not trying to just manage it, but also try and get on top of the entire breeding cycle there. Cool. Anything to add to that?
Not really. I mean, if you could set up a camera to watch what they're doing with it before you take them out, that could be helpful. Maybe they have like a little routine they do with the toys before they regurgitate on them, or maybe it's just a certain type of toy, like Lee said. So it just depends on what they're doing. Rocky was trying to push herself up against a swing a couple of weeks ago. I was the only one to notice this swing action, but it very quickly got removed from the cage. And now she's settled right back down, and she's allowed to have it back because she'll sit on it like a normal bird, but she's not trying to please herself with it anymore.
Rocky, you dirty girl.
Yeah.
Too funny. Megan, who has the macaw that they were having trouble getting back into the cage, has said that she was just saying to Tamika, who I'm assuming is her daughter, today that they should do target training with comment. So she knows she was on the right track now, and she's watching Sophie and Linda, which gave her that idea, which is awesome. Definitely any of the training you see Sophie doing with her birds is a really good way for other people to build up a relationship with your birds, for sure. All right, so while we've got a little break in the questions, I did also want to super quickly touch base on, so we've talked about aviaries, talked about foraging and enrichment, importance of independent play. We've talked about quality of time over quantity of time, so not focusing too much on just, I need to have my bird out for 3 hours, but actually focusing on let's do some active interactions. So because that's better. Your bird is going to be happier if you're spending active interaction time with them than just having them riding around on your shoulder for 3 hours. And then, I did want to touch base on, obviously there's also the option for meeting those social needs through having other birds as well. So it's not right for everybody, and that's something that I really want to stress. You should never get a second bird or a third bird or 16th bird, whatever, because you want to get it as just for the sake of having a companion for the other bird, because obviously there's always the chance that they just don't get along, or maybe they get along for a while and then they stop getting along. In the long run, you're responsible for that second, 16th, whatever bird. And so you need to want that bird as well. But if you are thinking about getting another bird, it's something that you're interested in doing, then having a second bird can be another way to help kind of meet those social needs, especially if you have a particularly busy work life. But it's not for everyone. For some people, it's a case of understanding that they don't have the emotional capacity or the social capacity to care for a second bird as well. And again, it's keeping in mind that even if you go out and get exactly the same species, they might not like each other, and then you've got two birds and you have to spend time with both of them. That doesn't mean that they don't provide some kind of social enrichment to each other, having them caged in the same room with enough distance between them so that they're not in each other's space, can still provide company, even if they don't necessarily get along when they're outside of their cages. So that's not to say that just because your birds don't get along doesn't mean that they're not providing, some social enrichment for each other. They certainly are. But it is something to keep in mind. So, but certainly if it's within your means with regards to time and money and space, then another bird can certainly be a good way of providing that, kind of balancing out that social interaction, social enrichment for them, for a busy person who works a lot and isn't at home as much as they'd like to be. So that's another option as well. Anything to add on that one, Ed?
My main one is I just plan for them to not get along, because it'll make your life a lot easier if you plan for the worst scenario. And then if they do get along or they can be housed together, then that's great. But there may be a very good chance that they don't actually get along, or like Lee said, they'll get along for a short period of time and then you'll have to change their setup anyway. So I spoke about this at PTA Perth with my guys. They were apart for a long time and then they were doing really good. So they ended up being housed together, but now they're back separate again and they're a lot happier being caged separately, but still being nearby and being able to talk and interact when they do come out and have that social time. But during the day, especially when no one's home to supervise them, they're separate to make sure they don't give each other too many bites or trying to pull each other's feathers. They're getting along.
Yeah, and look, I've seen posts from people who have had birds that have lived together for years, and then one day they've come home and one of the birds is, just absolutely mauled the other bird. It can happen pretty quickly. To be honest, I actually generally don't recommend keeping birds together in the same cage when we're talking about indoor caging, because just generally most of the cages that you can purchase for indoors aren't big enough to allow even like small birds in those double macaw cages together. I'm a bit meh about, purely because it's just not natural. They don't, even if they're bonded, they can have dramas. There's, limited resources, limited space. I think we can all maybe, I guess we can all probably feel, a little bit more we've lost Ebony again. We can empathise a bit more with this, having spent a lot of last year stuck inside our houses with our, significant others and our children, spending a lot of time in a small space. Doesn't matter how much you love someone, sometimes the inability to get away from them, even for a short period of time, can drive issues. And that's true for parrots in cages as well. Realistically, they're probably spending the better part of 18 to 20 hours of their day in that cage. And if they're in there with another bird, it doesn't take much for things to go wrong. So I strongly recommend, as much as possible, for birds to be housed in their own cages and to spend time out of their cages together, as opposed to having them co-housed in indoor cages. Outdoor aviaries are a different, kind of a different situation, especially if there's a bit more space in them. So that was the last other one I kind of wanted to touch base on. So yes, and we've kind of perfect come up on the end of our session. So it's just running an hour now. So we've answered all of the questions. I think we've covered off on all of the notes that I had made about what I'd like to talk about. So we will leave it off there for tonight. What what I'll do is this will be available for replay in the group afterwards. So if you missed out or you didn't get to watch it all, you can you'll be able to watch it back later. And we've got a couple of more plans, live sessions coming up in the near future. So keep your eye out. We'll announce those as we have dates and topics set in stone. All right, everyone, have a fantastic evening. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for the fantastic questions. And we will see you back here soon.